Regarding deliberate measures of balance of payment adjustment mechanism, there are a couple of measures. One is expenditure changing policy. Second one is expenditure switching policy. As part of expenditure changing policy, we have looked into the role of fiscal as well as monetary policies in adjusting the BOP disequilibrium. Here we have devaluation and revaluation as part of the expenditure switching policy. Devaluation and revaluation are considered as the expenditure switching policy, as both these two, devaluation and revaluation, causes for the shift or switching the expenditure for goods and services from one country to another country. That means these two, devaluation and revaluation, uh, causes for the changes in imports and exports of uh, countries. So that means devaluation and revaluation are clearly part of the expenditure switching policy. First, devaluation. I hope you are aware of the concept of devaluation, but I would like to speak shortly about devaluation. Devaluation is the deliberate effort of the government or monetary authority to reduce the value of a country's currency in terms of foreign currency. That means this is initiated by the government or monetary authority to reduce the external value of a domestic currency. So this is initiated to boost the export. That means this is to increase the export. How does devaluation boost or increase export? Exports become competitive after devaluation. So devaluation makes the exports competitive. That means the prices of exports come down with the devaluation. That means after devaluation, the export, the traders across the world will be able to purchase the commodities and services from the devaluing country at a cheaper cost than before devaluation. So devaluation makes exports cheaper, as the domestic currency's value has already come down with the devaluation. So it of course causes for the increase in export. Similarly, devaluation reduces the import, as imports become dearer or expensive after devaluation. That means the importers in the devaluing country will have to pay more after devaluation than before devaluation. So imports become expensive, imports become dearer. So of course imports come down with devaluation and exports rise with devaluation. So this is initiated to reduce the trade deficit or adjust the BOP disequilibrium. So this is part of the expenditure switching policy. But of course, both devaluation and the success of devaluation highly depends on a few factors, such as elasticity. That means import elasticity of demand and export elasticity of demand. A devaluing country need to have elastic demand for import as well as elastic demand for export. Then only the devaluation will make some desirable result for the devaluing country. Second one is market access for the devaluing country. The country devaluing country need to get the market across the world. Otherwise the devaluation may fail. The third one is production capacity of the devaluing country's economy. The devaluation hopefully raises the demand for export external demand for our commodities and services will hopefully rise with devaluation. But once the demand comes from rest of the world, the production capacity, the manufacturing sector has to be able to meet the external demand. So production capacity is of a prime importance. Next one is domestic price stability. Even though the devaluation is initiated to increase the export, but the country need to have a price stability. That means internal balance is relevant, is necessary for external balance here. Then next one is international cooperation. Of course, international cooperation is required. There should not be any currency war. The devaluation should not lead to currency war by the countries across the world. Then it becomes, it causes for the, that will be a zero sum game for the devaluing country. That should not happen. Second one, in this list, in the expenditure switching policy, is the revaluation. Revaluation is just the opposite of, this is exact opposite of devaluation. Revaluation is the deliberate effort of the government or monetary authority to raise the value of the, to raise the external value of the domestic currency. So this is initiated, revaluation is initiated to increase the value of a currency in terms of foreign currency. This is done by the monetary authority or by the government itself. So to this is initiated during the trade surplus period. When a country is having some sufficient trade surplus, exports greater than imports, then the country can follow this policy of revaluation. Uh, that means revaluation uh, leads to fall in export and rise in import, as devaluation leads to rise in export as exports become uh, expensive after revaluation. Then of course exports comes down, imports become cheaper, imports become economic, imports become competitive. That is the correct word. Imports become competitive, then imports rises. Imports, the price of imports comes down, then import fall. Price of exports rises, then exports fall. Import rise, export fall. That means the trade surplus, if any, will be exhausted by revaluation. So this, both revaluation and both devaluation and revaluation are the expenditure switching policy. That means that both the policies make some changes in imports and exports of the country adopting the policies of devaluation and revaluation. Shortly speaking, or briefly, when a country is having trade surplus or current account surplus, the country can follow the policy of revaluation. That is to reduce the export and increase the import. Then when a country is having some current account deficit or current account or trade deficit or current account deficit, then the country can follow devaluation. Then it helps the nation to increase the export and reduce the import. So this is the policy for balance of payment adjustment. Of course, the question here is what kind of policy is required for balance of payment adjustment. We need to have an optimum policy mix. We need to have judicious kind of expenditure changing policy. We need to have a judicious kind of expenditure switching policy. We cannot suggest or recommend this policy is good for you, policy is good for you. We cannot make that kind of prediction blindly. We need to have a judicious fiscal policy, monetary policy, uh, revaluation, devaluation. So it depends on many factors. So anyway, we need to have a optimum judicious policy mix for both internal as well as external balance.